When I turned 65, I threw a party for the family. No one came. Not a single soul. My heart sank as I sat there, surrounded by empty chairs, the candles flickering softly in the dim room. I checked my phone again. No messages, no calls. The silence was deafening. I had spent days preparing the perfect dinner, bought my favorite china, and set the table just as I always had for family gatherings. This was supposed to be a celebration, my milestone birthday, a moment to share with those I had loved and supported all my life. But no one came. No one even cared enough to show up. As I sat there, I couldn't help but remember the times when my family was everything to me, when I was their center, their rock. How had it all changed so suddenly? I felt my chest tighten, but I refused to let the tears fall. I wasn't going to cry over them. I wasn't going to let them see how much they had hurt me. Hours passed, and still, no one came. At 8 p.m., I finally sat down to eat alone, the untouched roast still sitting there, waiting for guests who would never arrive. As I took a bite of my dinner, I scrolled through my phone again. I came across a photo of my daughter-in-law and my son on a luxurious cruise. The caption, "Family time, making memories together." My stomach turned. They were somewhere far away, celebrating without me, without any thought of the woman who had raised them, supported them, and given them everything. I set my phone down, my hands trembling. They had abandoned me, and I knew, in that moment, that things would never be the same again. The betrayal stung, but it also sparked something deep within me. I wasn't going to let them break me. I wasn't going to stay the lonely woman they had made me feel. Tomorrow, I would start over. I would make them see that they had made a mistake, that they would regret ever turning their backs on me. I wasn't finished yet. I would prove to them that I could rise higher than they could ever imagine. They had no idea what was coming next. I spent the next few days in a haze of disappointment. I couldn't stop thinking about the party. The empty chairs, the untouched plates, the eerie silence that had filled the house. I had been so sure that this would be the moment my family would come together. But instead, I was left with nothing but the lingering smell of my cooking and the sound of my own thoughts. It wasn't just about the party. It was the years I had invested in them, the sacrifices I had made. They owed me more than this. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt truly loved, truly needed. All I had now were memories of better times. Times when my son would call me just to check in, times when my daughter-in-law would laugh with me over tea. Those moments now felt like they belonged to someone else, like they had never really happened at all. I had tried to ignore the little signs for years, the coldness in my son's voice, the way he avoided eye contact when I spoke to him. I had chalked it up to his busy life, his growing family, and his responsibilities. But deep down, I knew something was off. It wasn't just the party. It was everything that had led up to it. I had been pushed aside, quietly and slowly, until I became invisible, and they didn't even realize it. That night, I decided that things had to change. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for their apologies or their pity. I wasn't going to beg for their attention anymore. I had spent too many years giving them everything I had, and in return, I had received nothing but indifference. But I wasn't helpless. I knew that. I still had my strength. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to start over. I took a deep breath as I looked around the house. It felt different now, like I was seeing it with new eyes. The walls, the furniture, the pictures on the mantel, they all seemed to mock me. I had poured so much into this family, but in the end, they had just taken and taken. They had drained me dry, and now they had moved on without a second thought. But I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let their indifference define me. I didn't need them to survive. I could make my own way. I would prove to them, and to myself, that I was stronger than they thought. I wasn't just some old woman waiting to be forgotten. I had something they didn't understand. I had the power to change my life, to rise above the pain they had caused me. And I would start with the one thing I still had, myself. I left the house that day, knowing that I was about to embark on a new chapter. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would no longer be invisible. I would no longer let them treat me like I didn't matter. The Ferrari, the success, the life I was about to build, it was all just the beginning. I was done with the past. It was time for me to take control of my own future. The following weeks were filled with a quiet, simmering determination. I threw myself into learning everything I could, from business strategies to finance. All the while keeping my mind on my goal, I would not let their abandonment define me. I found a part-time job at a local boutique, selling vintage jewelry, but I wasn't just there to make money. I was there to network, to meet people who might offer the chance I needed to change my life. Slowly but surely, I began to save every penny. Each dollar I earned felt like an investment in my future. But it wasn't enough. I knew that if I wanted to make a significant change, I had to go beyond what was familiar, beyond what I had known for years. One evening, after finishing my shift at the boutique, I sat down with a glass of wine and took out the business plan I had written weeks before. I had read it over so many times, but now, it felt different. This was my future, right here on these pages. I began to refine it, tweaking the details until I had something concrete. I was going to start my own business. It wasn't going to be easy, and there was a lot I still didn't know. But I had something that couldn't be taught, the will to succeed. As the months went by, things started falling into place. I sold my old car, the one that had been with me for so long, and used the money to invest in the equipment I needed to start my business. I didn't have a clear idea of what would happen next, but I knew that I was finally on the path I was meant to take. My family, they barely crossed my mind anymore. The hurt was still there, but it had faded into the background of my determination. One morning, as I sat in my small office, working on a project for my new business, I received an email that changed everything. It was from an investor, someone I had met at a conference months ago. They were interested in funding my business. I couldn't believe it. I was being offered the chance to take my idea to the next level. I stared at the screen for a moment, not sure if I was dreaming. But the more I read, the more I realized this was real. I had done it. I had finally made it. Over the next few months, I poured my heart and soul into building my business. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. I worked long hours, sacrificing weekends, but every small victory kept me going. Then, one day, I got the call I had been waiting for. My company was thriving. I had a team of people working with me now, and we were on track to expand. The dreams I had once held in secret were now my reality. I had done it all on my own, without anyone's help or approval. The Ferrari? It wasn't just a symbol of success. It was proof that I had changed my life. And when I drove it back to my hometown for the first time, I knew the past would never have the power to hold me back again. I wasn't the woman they had abandoned anymore. I was someone else entirely. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't forgotten. I was a force to be reckoned with. When I pulled into my old neighborhood, I couldn't help but smile. This was my moment. This was the beginning of something entirely new. I had returned to my hometown with more than just a Ferrari. I had come back with a sense of accomplishment, a quiet confidence that had been missing for years. Driving through the familiar streets, I felt a mix of emotions. The houses looked the same, but everything else felt different. I wasn't the person I had been when I left. I was no longer the woman they had dismissed, the one they thought would never amount to anything. No, now I was someone they would have to reckon with. As I approached the old neighborhood, I saw the familiar faces of my old neighbors, people who had watched me grow up and watched me fade into the background. Some of them greeted me with warm smiles, others with looks of curiosity, but all of them seemed to take a second glance at the shiny new car I was driving. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent so many years trying to be seen, trying to prove I was worthy of their attention. But now, I realized, I didn't need their validation anymore. I had done this on my own. I wasn't here to prove anything to them. I was here to prove it to myself. I parked the Ferrari in front of the house I had once called home. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped out of the car. The house still stood the same, but to me, it felt like a distant memory. I had spent so many years giving everything I had to a family that had never appreciated me. And now, it was time to take control of my life. I walked up to the door and knocked. I could hear the sound of footsteps approaching from inside. When the door opened, I was greeted by my son's face. He looked at me, his eyes widening in disbelief as he took in the sight of me standing there. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, letting the silence hang between us for a moment. He looked at the Ferrari parked outside, then back at me, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. I didn't expect you to come back," he said, his voice uncertain. I smiled softly, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm not here to talk about the past," I said. "I'm here to talk about the future." His expression faltered, and I could tell he didn't know what to say. I had always been the one to support him, to be there for him when he needed me. But now, It was my turn to take the lead. I've made something of myself, I continued, my voice steady, and I'm not going anywhere. His gaze dropped to the ground, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I'm sorry, he said, his voice low. I should have been there for you. But I didn't need his apology anymore. I had already moved on. It's too late for apologies, I said, my voice firm. But I've learned something important. I don't need your approval. I never did. I turned and walked back to the Ferrari, the sound of my heels clicking against the pavement. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had nothing left to prove to him or anyone else. The past was behind me, and the future was all mine to shape. As I drove away, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer tied to the past, to their expectations, to their judgments. I was free to live my life the way I wanted to, on my own terms. And no one could take that away from me. I woke up early the next morning, feeling the weight of everything that had led me to this point. I had done it. I had come back and shown them that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't the woman they thought I was. But there was still more to do. I had made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of me anymore, not even my family. It wasn't just about the car or the business or the money I had made. It was about my freedom, my ability to live life on my own terms, without anyone's approval or permission. I knew I had worked hard for everything I had, and it felt good to see the results of that effort. But the real test, I knew, was how my family would react to all of this. How they would treat me now that I had everything I needed, now that I had stepped into a power I had never allowed myself to claim before. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee, thinking about the next steps. There were still some things that needed to be addressed. My son had reached out to me a few times since our last conversation, but I hadn't responded. I wasn't sure what to say. The guilt I saw in his eyes when he apologized, it didn't change anything. The damage had been done. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had moved on from that version of myself, the one who was constantly waiting for a call, a text, or an apology. I had stopped waiting. That was the first lesson I had learned in this new chapter of my life. I was done waiting for validation from anyone. I wasn't going to beg for love, for attention, or for respect. If they wanted to be part of my life, they would have to meet me where I was now, on equal ground. The sound of my phone ringing broke me out of my thoughts. It was my daughter-in-law. I didn't answer it right away. I let it ring for a while, then I hit the decline button. I wasn't ready for another round of empty apologies and attempts to smooth things over. I wasn't interested in hearing how sorry she was. I had heard that before, and it didn't mean anything anymore. What mattered now was what I chose to do next. I decided to call my lawyer. I had been thinking about this for a while, but now, it was time to take action. The family's house, the one I had built my life in, was still legally mine. I needed to make sure everything was in place to protect my assets. I wasn't going to let them come in and take what was mine just because they thought I didn't have the strength to fight back. I had already been through too much to let them take advantage of me again. The lawyer's office was just a few miles away, so I drove there, taking my time, making sure I was calm and collected. As I walked into the office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This wasn't the same woman who had walked into that office years ago, looking for advice on how to handle a broken marriage. This woman was different. She was in control. She knew what she wanted, and she wasn't afraid to take it. We went over everything. The house, the business, the trust. It was all set up perfectly. I had everything in place to protect myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. When I left the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. The Ferrari, the business, the money, all of it was just the beginning. I had everything I needed to create the life I had always wanted, and I was finally ready to live it on my own terms. The next few months passed in a blur of hard work and progress. I watched my business grow slowly but surely, with each small success pushing me forward. The days were long, but they were mine to shape, mine to control. I no longer had to answer to anyone, no longer had to explain myself. I worked day and night, building my brand, reaching out to clients, and expanding my network. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were days when the pressure seemed too much, when I questioned if I had made the right choices. But those moments were fleeting, drowned out by the feeling of accomplishment that came with each step I took. I had come so far, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. As my success grew, So did the whispers from my family. My son, my daughter-in-law. Everyone seemed to be watching, waiting for me to slip, for me to fail. But I wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. I didn't need their approval anymore. I was beyond that. One afternoon, as I was preparing for an important meeting, I received a call from my son. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since that day when he had seen me in the Ferrari. His voice was hesitant when he spoke. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said. I paused for a moment, unsure of how to respond. His apology felt hollow, like he was saying what he thought I wanted to hear. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't going to change anything. "It's too late for apologies," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I wondered if he was surprised by my response. But I wasn't sorry for it. I had come to realize that I didn't need anyone to validate me. I didn't need him to feel sorry for me. I had built my life, and I was going to live it on my own terms. As the weeks went by, I continued to thrive. My business was more successful than I had ever dreamed. I had a team of people working with me now, and we were expanding into new markets. The money flowed in, but it wasn't about the money. It was about freedom. It was about the power to create my own destiny. I had worked so hard to get here, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk when I received another call, this time from my daughter-in-law. Her voice was shaky as she spoke. "I know things haven't been easy between us," she said, "but I wanted to apologize for everything." I could hear the desperation in her voice, the same desperation I had heard so many times before. But this time, it didn't affect me. I didn't need her apology. I had already moved on. "I've made my peace with everything," I said, my voice calm. "And I don't need you to fix anything." There was another long silence. I could feel her waiting for me to say something, but I didn't. "Goodbye," I said finally, and hung up the phone. That was the last time I heard from her. I knew it was time to leave the past behind. It was time to step fully into the future. I had everything I needed to succeed. I had built my life from the ground up, and now I was going to make sure it stayed that way. I wasn't going to let anyone pull me back into the life I had left behind. I was in control, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. It was a cool afternoon when I decided it was time to visit my old neighborhood again. The streets felt oddly unfamiliar now, even though I had spent so many years walking them, raising my children here, and once believing they were the very foundation of my life. But today, they felt distant, almost foreign, like a chapter in a book I no longer recognized. As I approached the house, I saw the same faded mailbox, the same overgrown lawn, but there was no warmth in it anymore. No memory that could make me feel at home. I was no longer the woman who had been trapped here, trying to please others, trying to make them love me. I had freed myself from that. I stood in front of the house, letting the stillness wash over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just detached. I had spent years carrying the weight of their neglect, but now, it didn't matter. It was time to let it go. But as I stood there, I saw a figure approach from the driveway, my son. He was walking toward me with that same unsure look in his eyes. He must have seen my car in front of the house, but the shock on his face wasn't from the sight of the Ferrari. It was from seeing me standing there. "Mom," he said softly, as if unsure whether it was really me or just some stranger who looked like me. "What are you doing here?" The words stung, but not as much as I thought they would. I had come to terms with the distance between us. The apology I had longed for was no longer something I needed. "I came to see the house," I said, keeping my voice calm. "The place you've forgotten, I suppose." His face faltered, a mix of guilt and confusion crossing his features. He looked at the house, then at me, and I could see the moment when it clicked in his mind. He knew why I was here. "I didn't expect you to come back," he said, his voice hesitant, as if afraid I might lash out. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't even disappointed. I was past that. "I'm not here to fight," I replied, taking a step toward him. "I'm not here to get anything from you." I looked at the house one last time, feeling nothing but a sense of finality. "I just wanted you to see that I'm okay. And I'm not coming back to this. Not in the way you think." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I know I've made mistakes," he said quietly. "I should have been there for you. But I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need the apology anymore. I had already forgiven myself for letting him go. I had already forgiven them all." "You should have," I said softly. "But it's too late now." His eyes filled with regret, but I didn't wait for him to say anything more. I turned and walked back to my car, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet air. As I got into the Ferrari, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't about the car or the success I had built. It was about knowing that I had moved on, that I had built something for myself, and that no one could take that away from me. I started the engine and drove away, not looking back. I didn't need to. The past was behind me, and I was finally free. Days passed, and life in my new world felt steady. The business continued to grow, and I felt a sense of fulfillment that had been missing for so long. The Ferrari was parked in my driveway, a constant reminder that I had created something for myself, something no one could take away. But even with all the success, there was still one piece of unfinished business I hadn't fully dealt with. My family. I had cut ties with them. It had been hard at first, but with each passing day, I realized it had been the right decision. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was one last confrontation left to have, one final moment where I could prove to them that I had moved on, that I wasn't the same person I used to be. One morning, I received a call from my daughter-in-law. Her voice was shaky, almost apologetic, as if she had been rehearsing what to say. I hadn't spoken to her since that day she had reached out with an apology a few months ago. Her words hadn't meant anything then, and I knew they wouldn't mean much now. "I know things have been difficult between us," she said, her voice strained. "But I want to make things right." I listened, silently, not sure how to respond. I didn't need her to make things right. I didn't need anything from her. What I needed was to continue on the path I had started, a path where I was in control of my own destiny. "It's too late for that," I said, my voice calm but firm. "What's done is done." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, waiting for me to say something more, to give her a chance to fix everything. But I didn't have anything left to say. "I've moved on," I added quietly, "and I'm not looking back." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It was done. I had said everything I needed to say. I wasn't going to keep rehashing the past. I wasn't going to beg for love or forgiveness anymore. I had forgiven myself for everything that had happened, and now I was free. The Ferrari was still sitting in my driveway, but now it represented more than just material success. It represented my freedom, my strength, and the new life I had created for myself. It was a symbol of everything I had overcome and everything I was capable of. The next day, I received another call, this time from my son. His voice sounded different this time, less defensive, more vulnerable. "Mom," he said, his voice almost pleading, "I've been thinking about everything, and I want to make things right, too." I let out a deep breath, thinking carefully before responding. "It's not about making things right," I said, my voice steady. "It's about moving forward." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he might say something more. But he didn't, and I didn't need him to. "I've already moved forward," I said softly, "and I'm not going back." With that, I hung up the phone. That was it. The last tie had been severed, and now I could finally focus on what mattered most, my future. The road ahead was long, but I was no longer walking it alone. I had myself, my success, and the strength to continue building the life I had always dreamed of. And no one could take that away from me. It had been months since I last heard from my son or my daughter-in-law, and frankly, I had stopped expecting anything from them. The calls, the apologies, they had all faded into the background of my new life, where I was the one in control. I had built my business from the ground up, and each day, I was more confident in the life I was creating for myself. But even with all my success, there were moments when the emptiness of the past would creep up on me. There was still a part of me that longed for the family I had once known, even if they never treated me the way I deserved. One afternoon, as I was finishing up a meeting in my office, I received a message from my son. The text was simple, just a few words. "Mom, can we talk? It's important." I stared at the message for a while, unsure of what to feel. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep moving forward without any further drama. But another part of me, the part that still held on to the hope of a family, couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment for closure. I decided to respond, agreeing to meet him. When we sat down together a few days later, I could tell that he was nervous. His usual confidence was replaced by a tension I hadn't seen in years. He looked at me, almost as if he were waiting for me to speak first. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom," he began, his voice tentative. "About everything. About how I treated you." I nodded, letting him speak. I wasn't going to interrupt. I had already heard so many apologies from him over the years, but this time felt different. He seemed sincere, but I couldn't let myself fall into that old pattern of believing him just because he said the right words. I've been selfish, he continued, and I know I can never make up for everything I've done. I listened quietly, my arms crossed, my expression neutral. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew one thing for sure. I had no more emotional energy to invest in a relationship that had hurt me so deeply. You were never there for me when I needed you, I finally said, my voice calm but firm. You and your wife pushed me aside like I didn't matter. There was a brief silence as he absorbed my words. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret, but I didn't feel any sympathy. I can't change the past, he said quietly, but I want to try to be a better person, a better son. I shook my head slightly. I don't need you to be a better son, I said. I need you to understand that I've moved on. I've built a life for myself, a life that doesn't revolve around you or your approval. He seemed to shrink at my words, but I didn't feel guilty. I had spent too many years seeking validation from him, from a family that had never truly seen me. I wasn't going to do that anymore. I don't want anything from you, I added. I don't need your apologies. I don't need your pity. I've created something for myself, and I'm proud of what I've done. He nodded, as if he understood. But I knew the reality was that he had never fully understood who I was or what I was capable of. And that was fine. I didn't need him to. I was no longer waiting for his approval or anyone else's. I had done the work. I had taken the steps to build a life I could be proud of. I think you should leave, I said after a moment. I don't want to revisit the past. I want to keep moving forward. He stood up slowly, and I could see the disappointment in his eyes. But it didn't matter. He had made his choices, and so had I. Goodbye, I said firmly, my voice steady. And with that, he left. As I watched him walk away, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. I had cut the last tie to my old life, to the person I used to be. I was free, truly free, to live my life as I chose, without looking back. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about revenge. It was about taking control of my own story. And that was exactly what I had done.